Nestled in the southeastern part of Nigeria are the Igbo people, one of the country's three major ethnic groups. Known for their resilience, entrepreneurial spirit, and social cohesion, the Igbo have not only survived but thrived, often being described as the richest ethnic group in Nigeria and arguably across Africa.
An entrepreneur means to me as a person, an individual who is focused and who set goals for himself, and the goal got to be.
Well, what I want is to see my vehicle all over.
From Alaba International Market in Lagos to trading hubs in Onitsha and Kano, Igbos dominate the major commercial arteries of the nation. They hold the largest middle class by percentage and boast the lowest poverty rate among Nigeria's regions. This one is all the more remarkable considering the historical context. A civil war that stripped them off of everything, followed by a reintegration policy that allowed only £20 compensation to many who lost their entire savings. Yet, from that symbolic £20, a generation of Igbos bounced back, and not just as survivors, but as economic pioneers. Now, how is this possible? What explains this transformation from ruins to remarkable prosperity? In this episode of Vista, we don't just explore why the Igbos succeeded, but how. And the truth lies deeper than grit or ambition. It's a story of cultural design, economic ingenuity, and social systems built over generations. Like any successful people, the Igbo story begins with culture and history. Pre-colonial Igbo society was decentralized, organized into villages and chiefdoms without a central authority. Unlike other African groups that expanded through conquest, the Igbos remained landlocked in a fertile but limited region, focused largely on agriculture, artisanry, and most importantly, trade. Trade was so central to their life that it shaped their spiritual and cultural calendar. The traditional four Igbo market days, Eke, Orie, Afo, Nkwo, formed the heartbeat of local economies. But the colonial era brought with it a new dynamic to this trend. You see, following the amalgamation of the various parts of what is today Nigeria, the previous barriers to trade was removed, and as such, pushed by population density, many Igbos started moving across various parts of the country in search of new markets, and many of these early Igbo migrants not only settled for trade, but in fact, courtesy of the embrace of Western education, were in fact employed into the colonial civil service across the country. And as a result, by the time of independence, the Igbos were already the dominant group in Nigeria, not just in trade, but across various sectors of the Nigerian economy. However, the Igbos hit a bump with the crisis that ensued in the 60s post-independence, leading to the mass pogroms against them across the country, especially in the north, which was followed by the mass exodus back to the east and subsequent civil war that lasted about 3 years, that saw not just the loss of lives and properties, but the systematic and socio-political and economic disenfranchisement of the Igbos. After the war, the federal government's policy of integration was in practice exclusionary. Igbo-owned assets were seized or devalued, and in perhaps the most symbolic act, the government awarded all the returning Igbos just £20, no matter how much they had in the Biafran currency. But instead of despair, the Igbos doubled down on what they knew best: trade, education, resilience, and innovation. And without £20, the Igbos not just bounced back, but in fact took their place back at the heart of the Nigerian economy, with strong base in manufacturing, services, real estate, and trade. And as a matter of fact, 80% of Nigeria's imports by sea are controlled by the Igbos. Today, the southeastern part of Nigeria remains the region with the lowest poverty rate. The Igbos by far has the largest middle class group related to its counterparts in Nigeria. And before you doubt this, ask yourself, why are the Igbos the most active social media users in the country, even when they aren't even the most populated? That's because in a developing country like Nigeria, more than any group, they have the economic means to. Whereas you may argue that the richest man in Africa isn't Igbo. Yet, for every Dangote in the north, there are hundreds of Igbos and co. In fact, contrary to the norm in most parts of Africa, the Igbos have by far the best equitable distribution of wealth. Interestingly, beyond Nigeria today, the Igbos have come to dominate various markets in Africa in various trades, from Yaoundé to Accra to Johannesburg to Kinshasa, and the list goes on. We can rightfully call them the merchant class of Africa. It's one of the saying that goes, wherever in the world you go, you would see an Igbo man. And wherever you don't find one, you can equally live there because there's nothing there. But the question is, how? How could they afford to achieve all this? Is it that they are more smarter, or like some claim that they achieved their way to wealth, or is it because they are more hardworking? Far from it. The Igbos, in fact, have designed a culture and framework that just puts them at an advantage ahead of others. And here's where you put your thinking cap. Let's expose the untold story of how the Igbos became rich. You see, a lot of society's success or failure is a byproduct and reflection of its values and institutions. Whether you talk about the Jews' dominance on global finance, or the America's solid democratic institutions and capitalist strides, or the Asian tech ingenuity, all these are possible because of the strong social institutions and culture. Perhaps not so well encapsulates the resilience of institutions, like in the case scenario of Japan and Germany, who were literally in rubble after the end of the Second World War. But what followed afterwards was in fact a rapid economic recovery like nothing seen in history. As a matter of fact, today, the economic divide between the first world countries and the global south is in fact a reflection of the strong institutions. This explains why even certain parts of Africa are much viable than the other. Like take for instance, places that the Europeans placed at the core during colonial era and had settlements in, like in South Africa, you get a more resilient institutions and infrastructure as they were in the core. Whereas other parts of the country which were peripheral, where they had no intentions of settling, they're designed to be exploited for the core. And in those places, they care little to build strong institutions. So away from this crash course, at least you get the point. Development is a byproduct of social institutions and has nothing to do with genetics or one group is superior to the other. Now, in the Nigerian context, the Igbos have built one of, if not the strongest social institutions. A proof of this is when you look at their investment in education. According to National Bureau of Statistics, out of the 10 states with the highest literacy rate, about 6 of those states are dominantly Igbo or have significant Igbo population. This naturally positions them as easily the most qualified group in terms of professional skills and employment opportunities. You see, following the Civil War, the Igbos initiated various programs, initiatives to rebuild its educational infrastructure. This saw the emergence of various community-built schools scattered across Igbo areas of the country, and in fact sponsored men to travel abroad to study, thereby building a strong diaspora in the process. In no time, these students groups become technocrats in their various endeavors, and consequently, the Igbos are never short of the best brains in the country, whether it be in business, tech, arts, and science. They will come to the cultural values. See, being Republican and a decentralized society like the Greeks, much emphasis is placed on individualism in collectivism. The Igbos rise from the ancient, deliberate and vote on matters democratically, from the family to the village and clan levels. And knowing that honor will be accorded to individual strides in the collective community, each person tries to healthily outcompete the other in this less hierarchical setting. You see, this less hierarchical arrangement meant that more than any group in Africa, the Igbos were the most prepared for capitalism. And so, when capitalism came knocking, like the Jews of medieval Europe, they easily dominated the economy. You see, the Igbos' dominance in the economy goes beyond trading. In fact, it goes into participating in all the chains of trade, from production to distribution and exchange. And at the heart of it is the Igbo apprenticeship system and show clubs and guilds. Now, the Igbo apprenticeship system, otherwise known as Igba-Boi, is regarded as the largest business incubator in the world. In fact, it is directly involved in making thousands of dollar millionaires in Nigeria today, and is presently being studied by renowned institutions like Harvard. This system emphasizes practical learning and management of business rather than the theories you get in schools. It's based on an informal agreement between a master trader and the master student. For 5 to 7 years, the student learns not just how to buy and sell, but how to negotiate, how to manage the customers, how to handle loss. He wakes up early in the morning and sleeps late, and works every single day, and practically becomes the ward of this master, serving him beyond just in business, but in other aspects under his master's roof. At the end of his apprenticeship, the master settles him, gives him his startup capital, merchandise, or a small shop. Now here's the magic. In this system, every apprentice is a future competitor, yet the master trains them anyway. Why? Because competition is not a threat in the Igbo commercial worldview. It is a source of pride if your apprentice becomes richer than you. You are praised and you're honored. In no time, the apprentice becomes a master, takes in his own boys, and the cycle continues. This is not just business. This is an economic chain reaction, a locally engineered wealth multiplier with no government in. This mode is usually a sharp contrast with the conventional mode of capitalism, which seeks to outcompete other competitors and usurp the entire market share. But there is the biggest genius of this system, as the competition isn't necessarily among themselves, but in fact is for the entire market and industry. In this system, the master relinquishes his market share not just to build his graduate apprentice, but in fact to create an ecosystem that would dominate the market. A quick crash course here. Let's say Mr. A is a non-Igbo venture and B is Igbo. What the apprenticeship system does is that it multiplies B to C, D, and so on. It looks at first like they are just balkanizing the market share. Not until when you find out that B and his surrounding ventures are creating an ecosystem that not just only offers competitive prices, but multiple options to the consumer than Mr. A. In the long run, Mr. B and Co. seem to have more product variety and competitive pricing. They create the impression on the consumer that he would get a better pricing in Mr. B and Co. ecosystem, overlooking Mr. A, who would soon go out of business. In no time, the gate becomes the go-to source for that particular commodity. And because they have outcompeted the other ventures and now have a collective monopoly on a particular commodity, they now can easily manipulate the prices as they wish. The monopoly is collective and not individual, like you would have elsewhere. The slogan here is Oyai Hena Wanaya, which translates to no one should be left behind. A more equitable social capitalism. That's why the Igbo trader would immediately join a fellow Igbo trader in the same type of trade in the same location. And this is how Alaba Market, Computer Village, Mbukobosi, etc. were created. This guide helps them to control trade prices and manage risk. Another that isn't often mentioned is the network of supply chains that the Igbos have across the globe. You see, for that guy that imports, let's say from China or the US, he has another Igbo brother who is involved in the supply chain over there. Each person might seem like an independent trader, but they are all linked by town unions, family ties, share suppliers, or collective import structures. This allows them to undercut prices, share logistics, capture entire supply chains. And with time, as this merchandise grows, they switch to manufacturing. That's why almost all major Igbo industrialists were initially traders. Take for instance Innocent Ventures that started from selling auto spare parts and now is into automobile manufacturing. As a matter of fact, is Africa's first indigenous automobile manufacturer. You see, whereas other parts of African countries and industrialization seem to be driven mainly by foreign direct investments, the Igbos seem to be carving their own paths themselves. Then there is mismanagement and financing. For many Igbo small and medium enterprises, social clause play the trick. Here they come together, usually people in the same craft, and they often pay certain specified periodic contributions, which are usually shared at an agreed time, or sometimes used to support members in times of need. These clubs somewhat serves as a zero-interest credit source. A little wonder why Igbo business are less likely to fail than others. Also, these social clubs, like the Post Club of Nigeria, which was formed in 1971, just after the war, usually made up of prominent figures in the society, also provides platforms for socialization and connections, and not just contributions. This one in turn creates a network that a newbie can leverage by association. And if there's anything one can learn about money and ideas, is that it's found in association, something that the Igbos have carefully crafted. Aside socialization and learning opportunities, this group in fact embark on community and social development initiatives, like other known forms of Igbo apprenticeship systems empowerment programs, usually for females who, for obvious gender reasons, may not be able to participate in the Igbo apprenticeship system. A huge part of the Alaba Market, which is the soul of Nigeria's and West Africa's textile industry, was formed with these programs. While most Nigerian diaspora communities focus on remitting money to their families, the Igbo diaspora focuses on reinvesting in their homeland. They don't just send money, they send machines, they build factories, they develop schools, they construct roads. These are not miracles. These are designs driven by culture that sees business as both survival and self-expression. Today, the Igbo controls major sectors of the Nigerian informal economy. They achieved this without a president, without a prime minister, without oil blocks or national appointments. The power lies not in politics, but in circulation of goods, of capital, of people, of ideas. They have become what the Jews were in Europe, a stateless merchant, but envied and resented. But their resilience is a proof of a deeper truth. You can deny a people power. You can deny them history. You can even try to erase their memory. But if they hold on to their culture, they will rise again. The story of the Igbo is not just a Nigerian story. It's a continental parable. It shows when people, commerce, and community align, even the most devastated people can rebuild. It shows that economic power does not need political validation. That with systems, trust, and reinvestment, a people can lift themselves. So next time you see an Igbo market in a foreign country, or a mansion in a remote village, or a container unloading electronics in a faraway port, remember, this is not just trade. This is history in motion. Because the Igbos didn't just survive the war, they won the peace. Alright guys, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more content like this. We've got more coming your way, so turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. Drop a comment. Want to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one.